They fell into a cathedral with no floor. 6 bodies and 16,000 tons of intention dropped through the mouth of the spindle as the star cone at their backs phased from gold to slate. The artifact's throat dilated like an iris and then forgot them. Gravity cut sideways. Thrusters lied. Every instrument on Commander Sable Arkady's suit offered a different theory of down. Frame drift 9 degrees yaw, Juno said in Sable's ear, voice clipped calm. Gyre flight pattern matches last year's tapes until the 3rd pinch, then goes improvisational. Everything improvises once it meets us, Sable said. She snapped a line gun at the nearest clean edge and let the tether rip. The hook bit glassy matter with a noise she felt in the bones of her wrist. 30 meters behind her, the freight core and armored spindle of human mass and hope followed obediently on its mag collar. A chain of drone pallets glowed soft as bees. House Del Car's emblem floated like a blood moon on the far side of the cavern, a ring with a knife through it. Their team had already marked 2 nodes. Sable could see glossy rigs slaloming through the air like predatory kites. At the front, a pale figure with a spear rig and a trailing cape of sensory filaments. Rukhé, the house's Vector duelist. In the tavern tapes, they called her the glass spear. Not because she was fragile, but because when she punched, you didn't see the crack until your arm refused to lift. Confirm mission, Maya said, breath steady. So none of us forget why we're about to be very unpopular. Sable could have reheated the brief. She didn't. She let memory work. A convoy of cold ships waiting at the edge of a sovereign corridor no one would grant them because humans were new and poor and uninvited to old tables. 33 ark-barges with sleepers that still dreamed of wind, grain hulks, medicine spines, a planet's gamble condensed to 7 burns. Under the Treaty of Orbits, sovereignty disputes didn't get iron and fire, they got proofs. Inside the spindle, you took a load through a topological mess, while the other side tried to prove you couldn't. The artifact remembered. The artifact decided. Whoever delivered the better trajectory to the gate wrote the corridor name. Proof of transport, Sable said. Weight class 12, contested. We win, the corridor goes on, the register is Kithway. We lose, House Del Car keeps the toll key and sells it back to us by the head. Say the normal part, Pike rumbled. The heavy suit made him look like a myth dragged into now. Plates layered like a beetle, shoulders full of dampers. Somewhere inside, a man who'd found church in recoil. We don't quit, Sable said. We don't do pretty, we do true. The spindle's first chamber tried to be generous. It was the size of a stadium and the color of nothing. Node beams crossed it like a cat's cradle, invisible until your suit mapped them in blue. Capture a node, and you could shift the local inertial frame by a hair. 10 hairs made a rope. Ropes pulled loads. Rukhé had a rope in each hand. Del Car is going for a double braid, Juno said, admiration and threat braided in their own tone. They'll try to yank our mass into their envelope at the pinch. If we fight that, we lose time. We don't fight it, Sable said. We ride it. Ride them, Maya murmured, already smiling. Sable kicked off the first pillar and flung herself into the blue. Her tether sang. She caught the second pillar with a boot spike and inverted. The freight core swung past so close it kissed the edge of her gauntlet. She felt its ancient, holy mass and grinned. Juno, she said, strip the outer shrouds on pallets 3 through 5. We're going to make Del Car a wind. You want them to catch our wake? Unorthodox. I want them to underestimate how much drag we can sell them before it kills them, Sable said. On my mark, Pike, give me a ripple pulse off your back veins. Mark. The spindle liked audacity. Or, it liked data. It shifted the room around them as if to see whether Sable's line would break. Rukhé's glass spear flashed. She pinned a node with a stitch Sable would have admired if it weren't about to make Sable poor. The double braid tightened. Sable let herself be pulled. Let the freight core yaw into Delcar's corridor. Let the drag stack like a polite avalanche on the pallets behind. Then she said, "Ripple." And Pike huffed a short, ugly burst from his stabilizers that made no sense if you were a physicist and perfect sense if you'd learned on slipped ice. The ripple traveled up the pallet line like a rumor. Delcar's braid caught it and amplified it and choked. Rukhé didn't lose a line. She never lost lines. She shifted hers into the harmonic and handed Sable's badness back with grace. "Okay," Sable said. "She's as good as they said she is. And it considers again decided out his. If you want is doing, and remand of his snide." "Better," Maya said, and took a knife from her thigh that wasn't a knife at all. It was a node harpoon with a mouth of hungry logic. She flung it at the seam where Rukhé's two lines wanted to disagree. It bit truth. The blue mapping shifted. One of Delcar's captured, nodes flickered, loosened, and became anyone's again. "Mine," Pike said, delighted, and caught it in both hands. They slung through the second chamber like beads on a whip. The freight core held true. Sable's HUD updated their ranking. House Delcar ahead by 1.2 seconds at Gate 1, behind by 0.6 at Gate 2. The Spindle hummed sub-audible approval, or maybe that was Sable's joints. At the pinch to Gate 3, the Spindle changed its mind about generosity. The chamber narrowed to a throat shot with black filaments, not beams to be caught, but gales that shoved mass into corners and then left it there, Juno's suit lit with graphs. "New behavior," they said. "No match in the tapes. Define it." "Black wind," Juno said. "Zero entropy shear. It hates edges." The freight core was edges. Sable felt the first breath of the wind try to persuade the core that adhesion to space was greedy. She married her chest to the tether and told it to stop using metaphors. "Rukhé's already threading," Maya said. "Admiration and the will to murder inhabiting her in perfect cohabitation. This is her house." "Not tonight," Sable said. She slashed free of her original line and fired a new hook into a seam in the throat's geometry that didn't exist until she told it to. The hook wedged. The tether smoked. The black wind wrote sermons on her back. "Commander," Juno said, "we don't have enough captured nodes to set a clean counterframe. The math says stop." "The math says how to do it if you're polite," Sable said, and thought about the thing she wasn't supposed to think about. Riot Vector. A way of cheating that wasn't technically cheating. Not adding force, but adding noise at exactly the worst frequency so the Spindle's tidy assumptions went arthritic. "You didn't introduce a new field. You introduced a stutter in an old one and forced the artifact to reconcile it with dignity intact. It was legal in the sense that the law did not possess language precise enough to call it a sin. It came with a bill." "Sable?" Maya said quietly. "No. We're clean," Sable said. "We're good enough clean." She hauled harder. The black wind stiff-armed them. Delcar slid past. Beautiful. Terrible. Rukhé's spear sang. One of Sable's pallets spun. Another clipped the throat and broke a tooth off the world. Sable let the loss happen and felt it like a bruise she would name later, and moved. They made Gate 3 down 2.7 seconds and missing a pallet. Sable's team breathed hard but not ragged. Fear had not yet had time to make interest. Rukhé coasted backward into view, 20 meters ahead, her spear slung. Her body language, an essay in everything you couldn't buy. The hour where you stop calling a tool by its brand name and start calling it by the name it gives you back. Rukhé toggled a public channel. "Human," she said, voice like clean glass. "I will accept surrender of your freight core at Gate 6. You will take your people and go home and call it mercy. I will ensure your register entry uses the word honorable. You will tell stories of tonight. You will not own anything except your bones. Sable blocked her faceplate so Rukhé couldn't see the smile that came without her permission. Del Car, she said. Your register entry already uses the word toll. Tell me how much mercy costs tonight if I let you keep the gate. Rukhé's spear tipped, a salute or a promise. You are quick with mouth, she said. Be quick with hands. Gate 4 will take you into the maw. It was built by something that did not think you would fit. The line cut. The spindle dimmed to a blue, darker than itself, and then, without asking if they were ready, flipped gravity again. The freight core swung like a wrecking ball into a hole that pretended to be a door. Sable went with it, and the world went sideways. Inside the maw, space folded like fabric, and then forgot how to be flat. Node beams braided and unbraided, refusing to be caught by anything so crude as intent. The black wind turned whispering. Juno's suit threw error flags and then gave up being dramatic. We need a new map, Sable said. I need a new religion, Pike said. Later, Maya said. Sable didn't look for nodes. She looked for rhythm. The spindle wasn't random. It was arrogant. It expected you to quit because it had more room than you did for surprise. She watched the way the freight core's mag collar hiccuped when the wind's whispering hit the same syllable twice. She counted. 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, 2. Juno, she said. Program a subharmonic on that cadence. A what? Juno said. And then, because they were Juno, he then proceeded be ask. The subharmonic was not polite. It was also not a riot vector. It was petty, a fingertip on a glass at the wrong dinner. The whispering wind, discovering a neighbor, moved its chair. Chamber shift, Maya breathed. You made it blush. They took gate 4 even. For a moment, Sable let herself feel it. Not pride, exactly, but that bright correctness when your body and the thing you're doing realize they belong in the same paragraph. Telemetry spike, Juno said, too sharp. Something just crawled our line. Del Car? No, Juno said. Ours. A ghost in our comms. It's writing to the freight core's collar. Sable's vision went blood edge. Lock it out. I'm trying to split it, Juno said. It knows our call and response. Which means it's from home, Maya said. Ice. The freight core hiccuped. Not a lot. Enough for the chain to feel it. Enough for Sable's breath to forget she liked her job. Enough for the spindle to perk its artifact ear. Talk to me, Sable said. Calm hammered flat and slid beneath her words. It's not payload level, Juno said, fingers audible even through their calm. It's authority. It's trying to assign the core to a different owner string at gate verification. In other words, Pike said, we do the work and they buy the land from under us. Which they, Maya said, and everyone knew who she meant without having to turn the word into proper nouns. Humans loved a faction when they could have had a planet. The Vanguard Ark had been arguing for a year that you didn't ask old empires for corridors. You took them. You didn't come to the spindle with pallets and proofs. You came with a virus and a vector and a banner. They'd told Sable to her face that proofs were begging in nice boots. She told them where to put their banner. Now, they'd put something back. Cut the collar, she said. We cut the collar, Juno said. We lose our freight core at gate 7, even if we make it. The spindle won't sign a load without a collar heartbeat. Then trace it, Sable said. Find me the stack. Kill it quiet. I can't guarantee quiet, Juno said. It's threaded through our own authentication. Whoever wrote it knows us. Of course they do, Maya said. They drink at our bars and kiss our sisters and talk revolution, while our teams sell suits to pay for fuel. Rukhé's chain appeared on deck 7, like a rumor that someone turned into a song before it finished being a thought. She took a node with the same lazy precision Sable envied. House Delcar flowed. "We're going to lose if we play nice," Pike said. "We lose anyway if we call the Spindle stupid," Sable said. Her HUD updated. Gate 4 equal. Gate 5 in 3 minutes. Rukhé ahead by a second and change. The black wind getting its breath back. She could Riot Vector and make a little ugliness in the heart of the machine. She could peel Rukhé off her node by making the node forget it was a node. She could drown the Vanguard Ark's ghost in the same noise and call that victory, and then the Spindle would send a bill to something that bled. "Sable," Juno said, voice low in the place where low lives. "If the caller flips at Gate 7 and the register sees House Delcar's name on the core, the corridor is theirs, by proof and by paper. They'll own Kithway with our running shoes still warm on it. Then we don't get to 7 with their name on it," Sable said. "Trace it, cut it, on it. And if you can't," Pike said, "do we riot?" Sable looked at the freight core not as a mass, but as a prayer. 33 ark-barges, clinics, grain. A daughter she had refused once because babies didn't belong in cockpits, and now didn't belong in freeze because mothers who flew kept living. She looked at Rukhé carving lines in the blue. She looked at the ghost chewing their collar. "You riot when you have to," she said. "You riot when the bill is yours, and you can pay it without sending the debt to someone who can't. Not because it's clever, because it's ugly and you still choose it." "Ugly it is," Maya said, and smiled like she'd cut 3 fingers and decided not to complain to a god about it. They hit Gate 5 neck and neck. The Spindle rotated the map again. Delcar cut left. Sable took the right-hand seam where the wind sounded like grinding teeth. "Juno," Sable said, "kite up our own beacon. Hide it in the freight's noise. If they're using our call and response, we give them a new call, and we burn it the second they say the wrong word." "That's a trap you lay for friends," Maya murmured. "No," Sable said. "That's a rope you hand to someone who's already falling and tell them it's silk." The collar ghost bit again. Juno hissed and bit back. "It's spoofing the electrode pattern we use to heartbeat the core," they said through their teeth. "Idiots. They took the old one from 3 builds ago." "And you left it in the firmware for compatibility," Maya said. "Because you're soft. Because I like our junk to talk to our fancy," Juno said. "Shut up and help me swear at it." Rukhé took a node Sable had been pretending not to want. Sable let it go and took a worse one fast. The freight core twisted. The black wind remembered it hated edges and came back meaner. "Commander," Pike said. "I know," Sable said. "Next pinch is the kill box." "Kill box," Maya said, pleased. "Been a while." Sable put herself where the black wind wanted to be and made it argue. Rukhé's spear flickered through the blue, and for a white second Sable saw the duel that had nothing to do with freight or corridors, 2 bodies and 2 decisions about the correct way to be alive meeting in air. Then something else moved. A 7th body, no house colors, no human tag. A ghost rig with a cheap tether sliding in on a vector that made more sense if you assumed it didn't care if it died. It came for Sable's freight core like hunger comes for a cupboard. Keo would have called it poetry if she were here. Sable called it stupid with a budget. "Juno," she said, "friend or foe, I am going to murder them," Juno said serenely. "Ghost Rig is broadcasting on the Ark's old handshake. That's our saboteur. They're trying to slap a new collar on us at speed." "Ours," Pike said. "Maya," Sable said, "pop their tether." Maya's harpoon sang. The ghost rig juked like a liar with a good memory. Sable had half a second to decide whether to let the rig try its collar and find out if Juno's trap worked, or shoot a Riot Vector through the node network and make the rig forget it flickered. She didn't like either. She did what she always did when choices were bad, a third thing that would make a worse story and a better night. "Rukhé," she said. Open channel. Delcar's spear tilted. Human. That rig is not mine, Sable said. It's stealing my kill box and your proof. If you don't want to share a corridor with thieves, we cut it together. Silence. Sable could feel Maya rolling her eyes so hard a medic would have gotten a consult. On my count, Rukhé said. They did it like they'd trained together for years, which they had not. Sable gave the ghost rig a rope with her beacon. Rukhé cut it at the throat. Sable shoved with a subharmonic. Rukhé pinned a node and pulled. The ghost rig spun, touched a wind wrong, and became a smear of foil spray and ambition. Debt is a rope, Rukhé said. And a snake, Sable agreed. Already moving. We'll pay for using your hands. You will, Rukhé said, and killed their line again. Juno exhaled a sound that might have had profanity in languages Sable didn't speak. Ghost handshake is gone, they said. Trap didn't get to eat. I'm sorry. I wanted to watch it choke on its clever. Later, Sable said. We make gate 6. They did, down half a second, bleeding a pallet. The freight core angry but faithful. The Spindle doing its best to pretend it wasn't amused. Sable spared a glance at the ranking list on her HUD and felt her stomach subduct. A new line had appeared under regulators, the Spindle's impartial referees. Observation notice, live cargo penalty, verified. Proof must include life support continuity within corridor radius at T+0. What is that? Pike said. Penalty clause, Juno said, voice gone very flat. They added it after the Jati incident. If your corridor proof doesn't guarantee continuous life support for biologics crossing at gate time, your proof is elegant and irrelevant. We came with freight, Maya said. Not people. The convoy is people, Sable said, and tasted metal that had nothing to do with the suit. They're telling us we don't just have to show that mass can move. We have to show we can keep them breathing while it moves. And if we don't, Delcar wins on appeal, Juno said. They'll graciously escort our convoy for a fee, and we'll call it survival, and we'll never own anything but our bones. Sable didn't swear. She didn't pray. She pictured the ark-barges stacked with sleeping faces and wild seeds and stupid human hope. Her hatred for paperwork rose like a tide. She loved the Spindle. She hated whoever had added this clause today as if proofs were policy memos. Options, Maya said. We need a life support channel, Juno said. We need to demonstrate a thermal and atmosphere corridor wrapped around our vector at T+0. We need... Oh, they said. Small and dangerous. We need a beam. Vector wrapped, conformal, Sable said. We can do that. We can, if we steal Delcar's spare line and turn it into a heat ribbon, Juno said cheerfully. We can, if we're criminals. House Delcar will notice, Pike said. Then we make them choose whether they want to win on a technicality or build a corridor worth a claim, Sable said. Rukhé's spear flashed ahead, clean as a rule. Sable lined up the shot that would make every team lead from here to the inner cones, either curse her name or toast it until the bottle ran out. She fired a harpoon with her beacon braided through it and pinned Delcar's spare line at the seam. The line hummed, unhappy. Sable's suit bled error flags like confetti. Commander, Juno said, this is where you usually ask me to lie to you and tell you we can ride it. We can ride it, Sable said. Lie better, Maya said. We can ride it and be beautiful, Juno said fiercely. We can ride it and make the Spindle jealous. The line became a ribbon. The ribbon warmed. Around Sable, the map drew itself into a bright, thin artery. Life support didn't exist here in any normal way. There was no air to breathe in the Spindle, only equations to oblige, but the artifact understood the demonstration. A heat band you could tuck a convoy into and not lose them in the sharp. Rukhé sees us, Pike said, delighted mischief in his voice. Sable toggled the open channel again. Delcar, she said. keeping it dry because she liked Rukhé too much to ask her for anything out loud. Witness. Rukhé said nothing at all for a long second. Then, I see. I will not cut it. It is indecent and correct. Those are my two favorite adjectives, Sable said. Gate 6 in 20. Ghost chatter clean, Juno said. Collar handshake hours again. Vanguard Ark can crawl under a magnet and think about themselves. Never met a magnet that likes thinking, Maya said. They hit Gate 6 with a life ribbon spun around their vector and half a city's worth of bad opinions on their backs. The Spindle pulsed a neutral blue, which meant, interesting. On Sable's HUD, a message bloomed. It wasn't from Del Car. It wasn't from the regulators. It wasn't from Juno's swearing stack. It was a system, ping, unsigned, written in Spindle grammar. Riot Vector detected. Forecast, recommended. Cost, imprecise. Bill, localized. Sable thought of the bill. Not a fine in credits. A debit written on something alive. Eel beds, algae films, lungs. She thought of life support and live cargo, and House Del Car's knife ring waiting at Gate 7. She thought of the Ark's ghost rig and of Rukhé cutting it without being asked, because debt is a rope and a snake. She thought of winning and what it would smell like. Juno, she said, how many nodes can you guarantee if I go ugly? 3, Juno said. Maybe 5 if the Spindle is in a generous mood. It isn't, Maya said. It never is, Pike said, almost reverent. Sable looked at the heat ribbon she'd stolen from her enemy and tuned into a cradle for strangers. She looked at the black wind. She looked at the freight core. She looked at the message that wasn't a command and wasn't a taunt. She looked at her hands. Forget pretty, she said. We go deep. We take Gyre 9. And if anyone wants a riot, we choose the ground. Rukhé's spear burned ahead, like a rule that had learned to curve. House Del Car was not going to make this easy. The Spindle wasn't a friend, but it was listening. Sable cut left into a corridor that hadn't been there a breath ago, and felt the world pull something true out of her body and hand it back sharpened. Arkady, Juno said, unexpected, using her last name the way people do when they are about to say something that will hurt and make sense. If we riot, you will be the one who pays. Not the Ark, not Del Car, not the artifact. It will write the bill on you. Good, Sable said, and pushed off. A blade and a laugh. I'm the one who asked. They didn't quit. They didn't do pretty. They did true. And the Spindle opened another throat. The Riot Vector wasn't a shout. It was a finger in a cathedral's throat. Sable slid the noise under the Spindle's logic like a shim, and everything holy in the machine coughed. Node beams lost their smugness. The black wind forgot which way was dignified. The heat ribbon she'd stolen from Del Car clenched, then sheath curved around her freight vector with the stubborn grace of a living muscle. Gate 7 opened like a pupil. Proof track lit, Juno said. Disbelief sanded to professional. Life ribbon coherent. Collar handshake hours. Regulators acknowledge vector integrity. The freight core answered with a shiver Sable felt in her teeth. She tasted copper and ozone, and the memory of lightning she hadn't stood under. The Spindle's system glyph glowed on her HUD lines, arranging themselves with the cool insolence of an alien equation. Is greater than perturbation. Accepted. Reconciliation. In progress. Cost. Imprecise. Bill. Localized. Bill to who? Pike asked, because he liked names on debts. The answer landed behind Sable's eyes. Not a voice. A topology. Gyres she had learned to bully, now bent, and asked her what they looked like from her side. The black wind developed fingers. They touched her inner ear and taught it a new way to fall. Sable? Maya, I've got it, she said, and didn't, and would. They dragged the freight through Gate 7 on a ribbon so thin a wise person would have called it a rumor. Delcar's chain ghosted their flank, Rukhé's spear quiet, her spare line warming like a horizon. The artifact's throat narrowed behind them, with a sound only Sable seemed to hear. A grinding patience, math swallowing its own pride. On Sable's wrist, clipped where glove met suit, the coin Imka had traded her before cold sleep tapped the hard shell twice in the turbulence. 2 small knocks, a child's version of you promised. 12 years and fearless. Imka had given Sable the coin and taken Sable's compass in exchange a battered lump with a needle that only pointed right if you bullied it. Convoy confirms receipt of proof data, Juno said. Regulator's stamp, Kithway, provisional. Status, pending stabilization metrics. Rukhé's open channel crackled. Human? Delcar. House honor requires we certify a gate we did not cut, Rukhé said, a knife being careful. If Kithway holds as sauce and not bone, my family contests and you keep a story and lose a road. If it holds as bone, we sign your corridor and take our pain and reputation. Then come help me set the bone, Sable said. If Kithway breaks wrong, it breaks on both of us. Silence. Then, agreed. On our honor and yours, such as it is. Such as it is, Sable grinned, because insult plus contract is still a contract. Her HUD bloomed with a second uglier message from outside the Spindle broadband. All caps. Too much confidence. Is greater than Vanguard Ark, flag vessel doctrine. Notice of guardianship. Convoy Wildfield now under revolutionary protection. Juno swore softly in 3 languages. Pike's armor made a sound like a man volunteering to become architecture. Doctrine is parking itself at the Kithway mouth, Juno said. They're broadcasting that our proof is invalid without a people's mandate. They're offering to escort the 33 arcs through the disputed volume. Regulators are equivocating. Delcar's legalists are sharpening nouns. Convoy ships? Maya asked. 2 tugs and a prayer, Juno said. Captain Huerta's pinging. Do not let them near my sleepers, please. Sable shut her eyes for a microsecond and saw Imka in cold glass lit by engineering blues, the condensation around her pulse tube thawing and reforming on a rhythm that punished witnesses. You promised. She had promised badly, in a hangar with spray paint on the floor, a kid's hand in her gauntlet, laughter between strangers who wanted the same sky. Now she had to promise like an adult, with a bill. Inside, the Spindle rearranged its grudges. The Riot Vector shim required reconciliation. The artifact moved parameters like a chess player, refusing to say checkmate out loud. On Sable's HUD, a new glyph unrolled like a breath held too long. Is greater than Gyre 9, calcified. Fault. Inertia kernels exhibit non-response. Remedy. Perturbation agent required. Agent index. Arkady S. Of course, Maya murmured. You, not us. You're tagged, Juno said, awe and worry making a new chord. It imprinted. Sable, it's writing you into the corridor. Rukhé drifted up on Sable's left like a painting deciding to become a blade. Your face says you've been volunteered, she said evenly. Gyre 9 is calcified, Sable said. The Spindle wants a perturbation agent to reset the kernels. It pointed at me. What happens if you say no? Pike asked. The bill lands on a smaller thing that can't carry it, Sable said. A pilot who doesn't hear the wind. An arc hull. A sleeper who never wakes because someone made the room smart, then frightened, then indifferent. Ada's not Adia's. Then say yes, Rukhé said, as if the sentence had always had that shape. Sable said yes. It hurt. Not body hurt. Habitat hurt. The black wind wrote itself into her vestibular system and filed a change of address. Gyre 9's topology unfolded in her head as a spiral without stairs. She felt the Spindle's logic pick up her Riot Vector like a scalpel and use it on itself. In the quiet under the hurt, the artifact opened a new line on her HUD. Not a broadcast, an intimacy. Is greater than diagnostic. Required agent to introduce chaos vector at precise deficit. Your species supplies this. Thank you. Sable snorted and then regretted it. We're a screwdriver to you. Is greater than correction. Hammer. Flattering, Maya said. I hate it. Do it, Juno said. I've got arc control arguing doctrine with doctrine. I can keep them talking for 6 minutes if I promise them 3 little words. Civilian casualty estimates. Make it 9, Sable said, because part of leadership is lying to the right person. Rukhé. Human. We need to knit a conformal life sheath while I go inside Gyre 9 and make it hate me. You ask me to build a roof while you tear out a wall, Rukhé said. Acceptable. She bled her spare line into a ring, then into a ribbon, then into something Sable would have called beautiful if beauty weren't a luxury on a clock. They dove. Gyre 9 wasn't a chamber. It was a habit the Spindle had gotten into and refused to reconsider. It resisted the Riot Vector, the way an old musician resists a new time signature. In Sable's bones, the black wind arrived and sat down and crossed its legs. She touched the nearest inertial kernel with her mind, like a physicist who had gone to church by mistake and found it helpful. Juno, she said, I need an asymmetry. Giving you a left-heavy bias on your subharmonic. It will kick. Let it. The kernel kicked. The gyre shuddered. The black wind put its head back and howled no sound. All insistence. Rukhé tightened the life sheath around their vector, her spear stitching nodes in a cadence Sable recognized, on a level that had nothing to do with training. Measured, old school, rules obeyed, so the rulebook learned that obedience could be gorgeous. Different disciplines, Rukhé said, not looking at her. You add ugly to a perfect room until it stops being a lie. I take perfect lines and make them remember their first day on a wall. Together, perhaps, we can keep your coin from being a relic. Sable hooked the coin with her thumb and pressed it to the suit, like a blessing she didn't have to believe in to need. You're a classicist, she said. I'm a bar fight. The Spindle likes both, Rukhé said. Tonight, it asked for the latter. Outside, Doctrine warmed its launchers and sent a wedge of black and silver craft to posture in front of the convoy noses. Sable could see it on a corner of her HUD, ark-barge Wildfield drifting with its belly full of sleepers and soil. Captain Huerta's jaw a hard line. Delcar legalists, broadcasting in a voice like iron. Provisional corridor under proof. Interference is theft. Guardianship denied. The regulators splitting their hair into smaller hair and recommending that nobody sneeze. 4 minutes, Juno said. I can talk Doctrine into a speech about history. They love those. After that, they start loving missiles. Copy, Sable said. Gyre 9, answer your door. She put her Riot Vector in the gap between 2 inertial kernels and pushed. The Spindle translated her shove into a question it could respect. The gyre stopped calcifying and started sulking. The black wind admitted it had fingers and then let go of 2 wrong edges. Rukhé slid into the new geometry and spiked a node that had been waiting for someone with perfect wrists. The life sheath thickened. The heat ribbon bloomed. Half coherent, Juno said. We can lock a life corridor for 10 seconds at gate time. Doctrine can't argue an oxygen graph with a camera on it. Make this clean enough that I don't have to stab anyone with law, Rukhé said. You stab with law, Sable said, dizzy and delighted despite the hurt. Of course you do. You stab with noise, Rukhé said. We are both violent. We differ in footnotes. The gyre fought. Sable fought back. She paid. She could feel the bill being written on her inner ear and the tiny bones in her face, and something like a taste that would never leave. The Spindle whispered another system line that tried to be kind and landed like a tetanus shot. Is greater than imprint. Arkady. S. Persistence. Non-volatile. Corridor regulator. Subjective perception required. You're kidding, Juno said, reading it alongside her. It's binding you. You'll feel Kithway in your head until it chooses someone else, Sable said. Or it breaks. Rukhé's spear touched her shoulder, light as punctuation. You have my respect for accepting an oath that does not bother to be poetic. You have mine for calling it what it is, Sable said. They stitched the gyre shut. The artifact let them. The life sheath held. Juno pinged Captain Huerta with the kind of joy engineers are allowed when nobody's dying yet. 10-second corridor bubble at T+0 confirmed. Regulators green. Delcar witnesses. Doctrine is loudly unconvinced. Put them on, Sable said. Doctrine's captain filled a window on Sable's HUD, a face made generous by ideology, eyes already reading the history where they were the chapter title. Commander Arkady, he said. The people require more than elegant tricks. They require guardianship. Your proof is a stage show. Hand the convoy to us, and we will. Sable cut the audio. Save it for a rally. Rude, Maya said approvingly. Captain Huerta's voice came on a private band, tight and human. Sable, if I light drive on Wildfield at your mark, you'll keep me inside the thing you just grew. 10 seconds, Sable said. No more. And if your nose wobbles, you'll scrape it on God's geometry. I've done worse on worse maps, Huerta said. For the record, I have a girl on ice who traded a lucky coin for a trash needle that points nowhere. You bring her a sky. Sable didn't answer, because sometimes your mouth disrespects the oath if it gets there first. She watched the gyre's line in her head. She felt the black wind's fingers tap her inner ear in a 3-3-2 cadence, like a drummer checking count-in. She thought of the Spindle calling her hammer and Rukhé calling her violent and Imka calling her liar without meaning to. Mark in 3, Juno said. 2, 1. Wildfield lit. Kithway took. The life sheath shone like heat on a horizon you believe in, because the road deserves it. Delcar did not cut the ribbon. Doctrine launched a boat, and then bled it off because the camera liked oxygen better than slogans. The freight corps' collar wrote its name like an oath, and the artifact didn't correct it. On Sable's HUD, is greater than Kithway. Established, provisional conditional. Regulator, Arkady, S. Rukhé, QE, House Delcar, witness. Motive, restabilization required. Notes, perturbation agent, adequate. Damage, acceptable. Acceptable, Maya said. I'm going to frame that and hang it over a bar. Pike let out a noise that had passed for prayer in better centuries. Juno whooped like a scientist who'd tricked a god into citing a paper. Doctrine stopped being polite. Missile lock, Juno snapped. They're going to shoot in front of Wildfield and claim defensive scatter when you break their nose on your map. Rukhé, Sable said. Do not ask a favor, Rukhé said. Ask an obligation. Obligation, Sable said. Public house honor on record. You cut the missile or you lose witness. Rukhé's spear moved. The missile forgot which map it was using and died of embarrassment in vacuum. Debt is a rope, Rukhé said. And a snake, Sable finished. We'll pay later. The regulators found their spine on delay and issued a warning that had teeth. Doctrine's captain turned his speech up louder to cover the part where he didn't have an angle anymore. Sable's head rang. Not adrenaline, not grief. Kithway, The corridor had moved into her sense of balance like a permanent tenant, paying rent in a currency only the artifact recognized. She tasted the subharmonic she'd used. She knew where the life sheath thinned and where Rukhé's stitches could hold forever if the world wanted to learn the new chord. "Regulator," Rukhé said, tasting the new word to see how much insult it hid. "We have to go back in. Gyre 9 will scab wrong if we leave it." "Doctrine will probe while we're inside," Juno warned. "Delcar Legal will try to wedge conditional into contested if the regulators blink. Vanguard Ark will find another ghost handshake." "Then we split," Sable said. "Pike, Maya, sit on the gate mouth with our spare pallets and look louder than you are. Juno, you are my eyes on Doctrine. If they breathe wrong, you cough in the regulator's face with numbers." "Rukhé, I go with you," she said. "Not because of affection, because I did not build a spear to watch you use a hammer as a scalpel. And because if I die in there," Sable said, "my corridor sticks with you like a tattoo you didn't ask for." Rukhé's mouth did something you could mistake for a smile if you were generous and tired. "I have worse tattoos," she said. "Let us repair your sin." They turned back into Kithway. The Spindle felt them coming and adjusted a little, like a door for a person who bothers to knock. On Sable's HUD, a new glyph unfurled, no longer clinical, almost conversational. "Is greater than pawn, partner." Sable stared at it until the black wind tapped her ear twice to remind her there was work, not philosophy. "We'll argue about that later," she told the artifact nobody else could hear. "For now, tell me where to put my noise." The Spindle obliged. They went deeper. They dropped past the seam mark into Kithway proper, the new corridor still raw around its bones. Even with the life ribbon humming, the place had edges that snapped at your thoughts if you let them. Sable kept her breathing slow and mean. The Spindle kept sending courier glints across her HUD, sparks of grammar that weren't words so much as invitations. "Is greater than Gyre 9 substrate friction. High. Request. Agent irregularity. Secondary. Witness weave." "Witness weave is me," Rukhé said, reading the same pulse without seeing it. She bled her spear filaments into a net no human arm could have thrown, stitching node to node with an underhand grace. Her method looked simple until you tried to imitate it and discovered your wrists weren't old enough. Sable didn't catch nodes. She put her hand, not her glove, her hand against the freight core's mag collar and listened. That was new. Before the riot, the Spindle had been physics and arrogance and rules. Now it was a room with a subtle lean in its floorboards and resentment about that lean. She whispered an off-metric ripple into the lean and made it admit momentum. The corridor flexed. Gyre 9 tilted. Not much, a degree and a bruise. The black wind touched her inner ear and wrote a note there that would not fade between shifts. "Good." The bill was being delivered to the right address. "Juno," she said, "give me micromass pulses from pallets 2 and 4. Left, then nothing, then right. 5 beats. Repeat. I want a walk that trips its own feet." "Conforming," Juno said. "I love when you make pretty words into assault." Outside, Pike and Maya built a mistake large enough to be persuasive. They stacked pallets into a chevron and laced them with projector halos, then slaved those halos to a thermal loop so they read as something more dangerous than cargo. Doctrine's forward boats shifted their lock. The regulators pinged them a warning with a bite in it. On the convoy channel, Captain Huerta laughed once, dry. "You two dressed the part well." Maya raised an empty hand in the camera like she was toasting nobody. "It's not a weapon," she said softly. "It's a lie." "Worse," Pike said, pleased. "It's administration." Doctrine launched a boarder disguised as a rescue pod, a sleek bullet with compassion painted on its face. Juno saw the handshake before the regulators did, and ran it through a filter built for liars. Border has 6 soft points and a hard spike, they said. Target, Wildfield's external rack. Maya, Sable said. Happy, Maya said, and flung a harpoon that wasn't built for vacuum and punched exactly the right seam anyway. The border went from sleek to embarrassed debris. You keep taking my fun, Pike complained. Study her angles, Sable said. You can copy clever if you admit it. Inside, the artifact asked for more of Sable's nonsense. She gave it a new, uneven return. 5, 4, 3, until the gyre's calcified habits couldn't find their own landing. Rukhé's stitches took the slack. The life ribbon thickened again. She felt the corridor move from making do to doing. Is greater than acknowledged. Adaptation. Live. Side effects. Persistent. What side effects? Maya said. Sable answered by swallowing a swallow that kept wanting to land sideways. Her inner ear would hate her for a week, maybe forever. I'll manage, she said. You won't manage alone, Rukhé said, which would have been tender from anyone else, and from her sounded like jurisprudence. House Delcar will assign me as countersigner. Do not think this is romance. It is audit. If your corridor begins chewing on its leash, my spear goes through it. Perfect, Sable said, and meant it. You stab with law. I bruise with bad timing. Between us, it learns. Juno's voice went very calm. Doctrine has shifted to legal artillery. They just filed a motion for emergency guardianship citing a line in the Jati addendum about cultural immaturity. Rukhé's mouth made a shape Sable wouldn't have recognized if she'd had time to be young. The addendum we insisted on after Jati because you broke a city copying your own bravery badly. We didn't break the city, Sable said. We broke our own myths, and the city was attached. Either way, file this. Witness House declines co-guardianship due to conflict of profit. Suggest delay. Require life sheath credentialing. Reference regulator present. I was 3 minutes ahead of you, Juno said, smug with purpose. They choked on regulator present like it had bones. In Kithway's skeleton, a last reluctance shivered. Sable put a new shim under it and heard a sound only the Spindle knew how to make. A yes that resented her approximately as much as she liked. Captain Huerta, she said on the private. Bring 2 more barges to the gate mouth and hold them on a thread. Give me your worst mast to prove with. Grain Crown and Jiao Tu, Huerta said. Ugly sisters with bad manners. They'll test your fence. The proof bubble had to hold for Wildfield. And then, again, and again. Sable felt the corridor's hunger to revert, like muscle memory in architecture. Rukhé's stitches tightened. The harness of life and heat they'd built between a stolen line and an illegal song started to look like something that could survive a decade. The Spindle sent one more private line. It had learned enough of human to risk sentiment. Is greater than you remind us of the 6th species. They left after teaching us angles. You bring sway. We are curious. Curious is a dangerous word, Sable muttered. It eats time, Rukhé said. Talking to my employer, Sable said. He's a machine that thinks we're interesting. We are, Rukhé said, plain. 2 minutes to convoy commit, Juno said. Doctrine is building a speech about legacy in the background, while they buy time to find a legal spear. Their finance wing just contacted 3 of our barge lenders to spook them. Let me, Maya said, cheerful like thunder. She switched to a carrier channel only finance people used and spoke 2 sentences in a tone that turned debt into a weapon pointed the other way. Sable didn't know what the words meant. She knew how they punched. The lenders backed off like smart animals. On Sable's wrist, the coin tapped a 3rd time, no superstition in it, just physics misbehaving in the way that makes promises feel physical. She pictured Imka standing in a future dock with a scar under one eye and a temper she'd earned, bring her sky. Something uglier than hope moved in Sable and took responsibility's shape. "Juno, gimme air numbers," she said, voice even. "Life sheath fields stable at 94% coherence," Juno said. "Heat ribbon nominal. Your off-metric pulses are causing slight drift in outer sheath within tolerance. If your head gets worse, it's because you're becoming a barometer." "Romantic," Sable said. The first barge rolled in, grain crown lumbering like a building that had learned to skate. Kithway held. The sheath kissed its nose and didn't flinch. Behind, Zhao Tu tried to yaw in classic barge rebellion. Rukhé set 2 stitches that turned mutiny into compliance. "Mark," Juno said. The Spindle watched them and did nothing for once, which was as much blessing as it knew how to give. Gate time hit. The proof bubble burned. Wild fields slid like a name being signed. Doctrine's boats hovered outside the camera's love. Regulators stamped a line Sable knew they'd edit later to take the blood out. Delcar added witness in a tone that made honor a math problem solved by hand. On. Sable's HUD is greater than Kithway. Established. Condition. Restabilization pending. Regulator. Arkady S. Bound. Witness. Rukhé QE. Appeal. Open. Motive. Your species persistence requested. Bound, Maya said. Didn't ask for your permission, did it? It asked, Sable said, dizzy and calm. I said yes. Doctrine stopped performing and tried force one last time, a kinetic nudge at the mouth, dressed in legal apology. Pike moved his chevron like a man who had fallen in love with a bluff and punched common sense into it. The nudge didn't land. The doctrine ship drifted 3 meters out of position and pretended it had intended to admire the hulls. Beautiful, Rukhé said, almost chiding. You made your ugliness dance. Sable looked at her, eyes hot. Not tears, just the kind of salt nerves make when they're done being brave. We do that, she said, when math sneers. We sneer back with cleaner syllables, Rukhé said. Together, one might build a civilization. Don't threaten me with work, Sable said. Captain Huerta came back on, breath the sound of a deck with motion on it. Wildfield is through, she said. I have 2 sleepers whose hydration lines tried to throw a tantrum at the pinch. Your sheath didn't let them. One of them is a kid who traded a coin for a compass. Consider your shift covered. Sable let out something that sounded like the end of a held plank. She didn't have time to feel what she felt. The spindle tapped her inner ear twice, gently, its version of a nod. Doctrine withdrew 2 finger widths and filed a second motion that would keep 6 lawyers drunk for a month. The regulators did the thing they had always been built to do. Hide courage under cautious prose and buy enough hours for success to look inevitable. Back inside, Rukhé said. Your gyre is still sullen. They went. The corridor had learned 2 of Sable's tricks and was trying to teach itself a third. She wouldn't let it. Teaching it to prefer irregularity would get some other convoy killed when the artifact indulged swagger without a bill. She added a stutter, measured and small, so it would always remember to dislike being too perfect. Rukhé reinforced the stitches in a methodical way that would be mistaken for tradition by anyone who hadn't watched her write new rules. Why did the Spindle recommend your riot? Rukhé asked, almost academic. It calcifies when proofs get polite, Sable said. Every species teaches it a habit, then they leave. Then it treats that habit like law. We're a hammer. It needed a strike that didn't pretend to be an angle. A hammer is honest, Rukhé said. It is also lazy. I'm right here, Sable said, and my head hates me. Good, Rukhé said. It means your oath landed in the right room. Outside, the convoy slid into formation on a vector Sable could now find with her eyes closed because it lived behind her forehead. Inside, Kithway settled. The spindle stopped making glyphs and started making silence. That was new. Sable preferred it. Doctrine will not write the word defeat, Juno said, a scholar of egos. They'll write stay and review and further, but they're moving off. Delcar legal? Sable asked. Witness filed, Juno said. They used indecent and correct as a pair, which made me love them against my will. Rukhé inclined her head a millimeter. You keep my admiration, she said to Sable, as long as you keep paying. I like my debts itemized, Sable said. Good, Rukhé said. That is how walls are built without liars hiding in them. The corridor's last edge quieted. The black wind sat back and braided its fingers like a patient that has agreed to let the doctors talk. Sable's inner ear continued to ring in a way that would wreck sleep and improve instincts. She'd pay. Fine. On her HUD, the spindle wrote one more line for her, and no one else. Is greater than partner. Accepted. Return for maintenance. Bring your witness. Sable blew air out of her nose. It wants weekly dates, she said. Rukhé tilted the spear. Bring wine, she said, which, from her, meant bring discipline. Pike and Maya drifted into view, both of them radiating the satisfaction of people who had made a bluff an artifact could see. Juno's suit lights flashed a pattern Sable now recognized as joy. Convoy command asks if the corridor name is negotiable, Juno said. There's a faction that likes Imka's road. Sable closed her eyes exactly long enough to register a horizon she couldn't see. Kithway, she said. Imka can carve something else when she's old enough to tell me I'm an idiot. She'll be old by next month if you keep dragging gravity into your skull, Maya said. Then I'll have help, Sable said. Doctrine's captain sent a final packet, glossy, infuriating, inevitable positioning their retreat as magnanimity. Delcar Sr. sent a private note to Rukhé that said, if this turns to ash, we will eat our embarrassment at a public table. Rukhé forwarded it to Sable without comment, which was how you said we are allies when the bill is honest in a dialect that didn't like the word ally much. The regulator stamped a temporary full. The convoy nosed forward one by one, patient and heavy and splendid, and the new corridor took them without a jolt. Sable hung in the blue and tested her balance against a world that now had a filament tied to her inner ear. She could take it. She had a team that turned deficits into habits. She had a rival who wielded tradition like a scalpel. She had an artifact that said partner with the seriousness of bedrock. She had a faction outside who would come again with sharper slogans and dumber knives. Good. She preferred enemies with an education curve. Shift's not done, she said. Huerta gets the first 3 through. We stay until 6. Then we hand the gate to Delcar for witness hours, and we go sleep in armor. Romantic, Maya said. Administrative, Pike corrected. Necessary, Rukhé said. Human, Juno said, affection tucked inside the syllables like a pin. Sable turned Kithway 3 degrees against its own temptation to be pretty, and felt the corridor take that discipline and keep it. The spindle's silence was satisfied. The bill had been delivered. The receipt lived behind her eyes. Let's make this ugly thing survive, she said, and the corridor answered by holding. The spindle didn't open a door for them. It bared its teeth. Kithway held, raw and bright, a ribbon of life wrapped around a freight vector that would feed cities and wake 33 ships of sleep. Outside, the Vanguard Ark's flagship Doctrine hovered at the mouth with the hungry calm of a predator pretending to be the ocean. Inside, Gyre 9 sulked like old code. Sable felt both the black wind in her inner ear and the heat of Doctrine's targeting sweeps combing Pike's chevron of decoy pallets. Status, Sable said, voice flat steel. She needed facts, not adjectives. Convoy. 3 through, 2 at the lip, 28 in queue, Juno said. Regulators have moved from concern to sternly worded. Doctrine is broadcasting a new claim. Weapons safety audit. They want Delcar to concede co-guardianship. Delcar legal says, no, with verbs you would enjoy. House is honor, not snack, Rukhé murmured from Sable's shoulder. The spear filaments of her suit fanned like gills, weaving stitches between nodes with a grace that made the room hold still to watch. We witness what we do not own. Copy, Sable said. Her inner ear pulsed. 332, the cadence the corridor had learned from her riot. Pike, Maya? Chevon looks large, Pike rumbled, pleased. Doctrine believes it more than I believe in doctrine. I'm on their lenders again, Maya said. If they breathe wrong, their line of credit learns to hold its breath. Sable's HUD pinged a cold packet from Doctrine. A legal spear wrapped in rhetoric is greater than notice of guardianship. Addendum. Humanity's lack of phase discipline constitutes a risk to non-human shipping standards. Effective immediately, the Vanguard Ark asserts emergency control over corridor Kithway for stabilization and defense. Transfer authority or be escorted for your own safety. They've diagrammed safety into surrender, Juno said, affectionate toward competent malice. Classic. Rukhé's channel cut a pure line through the noise. Asterisk, asterisk. House witness, asterisk, asterisk. Guardianship denied. Witness will not certify seizure nested in aid. Approaches that smell of conquest will be recorded in shame script and recited yearly. End file. Your shame script has meter, Maya said, equal parts dangerous and delighted. It was written when our elders needed to say no without dying, Rukhé said, and spiked a node with such economy. Sable felt the room agree. Doctrine moved from paperwork to physics. Their forward boats pushed a bow wave into the mouth of Kithway, a kinetic cough shaped to collapse the ribbon too early. Pike's chevron took the shove and pretended to be indignant infrastructure. Maya lanced a rescue pod, turned border through its lie, and made the lie obvious enough that even regulators could taste it. 3 minutes, Juno whispered. Huerta's fourth barge wants commitment. Doctrine will shoot a witness shot into our camera if we don't create a moment so clean, even their edit can't smudge it. Inside, the Spindle sent Sable a glyph that wasn't a glyph so much as a look. Calcification. Systemic, not local. Request. Riot Vector at hinge. Variable. Emotional mass. Definition. Unknown. Emotional mass? Maya said, reading over Sable's shoulder. It's asking for an argument you can't put on a graph. Hey, so when? The riot isn't a frequency, Juno said softly, as if telling a secret they'd suspected and dreaded. It's a thesis. We make it solve for something it doesn't have a word for. Rukhé tilted her spear. Name it. Sable didn't have to search. The corridor had moved into her skull with all her unfiled promises. The coin at her wrist tapped the hard shell once as the turbulence changed, then nothing, then twice impatient child rhythm. Imka, 12, fearless in a hangar under bad lights, chalking stars on a floor she would not see soon enough. Bring me a sky, the kid had said, trading a lucky coin for a broken compass that only pointed right if you bullied it. Sable had laughed and said, deal like a younger person who thinks proximity is the same as responsibility. The Spindle had been built by minds that turned axioms into architecture and did not factor in a species that kept debts like myths. It needed oath. It needed grief that doesn't convert to rational units, but still moves cities. It needed spite, the good kind that gets you out of a trench and into a future. It needed a human variable with its own gravity. Sable unlatched her suit collar. Commander, Juno said, knife bright. No, you said it yourself, Sable said. It's not a button, it's a thesis. She pulled the throat connector aside and pressed the coin to her skin. Metal shock. Memory sharp as a scar you stopped lying about. Spindle, she said. Not aloud, not syllables. She showed it. The day she left Imka's mother, because cockpits tolerate passengers poorly. The night she didn't go to cold storage because she thought a clean win would buy a messy life. Imca in glass. A map of rivers frozen under skin. The convoy 1,000 names she didn't earn but carried. Rukhé's impossible grace. Juno swearing love at the shape of a curve. Maya finding church in knives. Pike turning into architecture. Huerta's burn-scarred fists on a wheel. Delcar's shame script. Doctrine's mouth. Then she pushed the sentence she had never wanted to say out loud into the room that makes truth into rules. I will not step on the roof I am building. I will hold it up. Write the load on me. Solve for this. A new glyph burned cold on her HUD. Riot Vector. Accepted. Parameter. Oath. Constraint. Life over precedent. Result. Rule alteration at Kithway. Access requires witness and regulator oath mass. Bill. Localized to Arkady. S. Consent. Given. Maya made the sound people make when a god answers in a courtroom. Rukhé's breath changed. The spindle heard her inhale and rewrote a clause. Outside, Doctrine packed their first kinetic into a lecture and called it love. Inside, Sable felt the corridor reach for her, like cold water learning your name. She didn't fight. Her inner ear screamed, then learned a new alphabet. Geometry flexed. The cameras caught it. Even Doctrine's edit bay would have to keep the shot. Kithway's sheath thickened, not from a generator, but from a human figure hanging in a room that learned to count her pulse. The heat ribbon flared. The black wind put its head down instead of its teeth out. Regulators, Juno said on a wideband with relish. Witness non-mechanical life sheath maintenance event. Attest to human regulator. Sign it or sit on it. They signed. Courts love a line that keeps a city from burning while letting them drink later. Doctrine fired the witness shot anyway past the lens, close to Wildfield's nose. Rukhé moved once, nothing elegant, all necessary, and cut the bullet's map out from under it. Debt is a rope, she said, weary and clean. Pay yours by not missing. Copy, Sable said, jaw locked on something that wasn't fear. It was cost. The spindle wrote pain as mathematics on the thin bones that make balance. She felt her heartbeat drop into Kithway's cadence. She could hear Huerta pushing mass onto it, and the artifact adjusting around her like a cathedral moving its pews to fit a new religion. 2 through, Juno said, bright with triumph and terror. 3, 4. Doctrine is trying a software injunction holy text about moral hazard. Delcar Legal just bit them with the line you'll love. We witness hazard. It's called living. House does not do pretty, Rukhé said. We do continuity. Sable laughed, a bad sound that was still hers. The room held. The Riot Vector wasn't noise, it was an oath equation. The spindle had to integrate it because the alternative was to declare that promises don't matter. Its creators had not taught it that. Their sixth species had taught angles. Humanity brought sway. It bent. Commander, Juno said quietly. Not to be heard, to be felt. What are you losing? Separability, Sable said, sleeping with my head turned off. Hatred for policy, maybe. Good riddance. You won't walk straight for a while, Maya said. Then I'll learn new lines, Sable said. Rukhé touched her spear to Sable's knuckles, light as a contract seal. House Delcar witnesses oath mass, she said, formal, ancient. We bind ourselves to carry the broom and the blade when regulator breath fails. Should you fall, we hold. Should we falter, you haunt. That's a terrible vow, Pike muttered, awed. It's the only one that works, Rukhé said. Outside, Doctrine found its teeth. They lit engines and pushed into Kithway's lip without permission, gambling that the corridor would treat force as courage. The Spindle looked at Sable and wrote another line just for her. Motive variable requested. Define malice. She didn't pause. She showed it. The pleasure doctrine's captain kept in a private vein when he made a rival flinch. The way Vanguard speeches thickened when someone else's loss smelled clean. The hunger to put flags into maps that preceded people. The Spindle had no word for that itch. It had systems for risk and gain and pressure. It didn't have a way to count cruelty. Sable fed it the feeling itself. The artifact froze for a prayerless instant and then wrote, malice detected. Denial. Access. Explanation. Non-geodesic. Doctrine hit the lip and bounced off math, then lied into a camera about intentional tests. Regulators put their sternness back on like armor and warned them in triplicate. Delcar Legal recited shame script with meter so clean you could hammer nails with it. Captain Huerta, Sable said, take Wildfield's sisters, all of them, we hold. Copy, Huerta said, voice threaded with something gratitude doesn't cover. I'll throw you a stone when we have a river. The convoy moved. The corridor held. Sable let Kithway take more of her weight because the truth was that Gauze knows what you are and it helps if you say it first. Inside, Kithway rolled its shoulders like a boxer that has found a stance. The gyre's calcification broke up like old scabs. The life ribbon hummed. The oath equation settled into the Spindle's grammar as a clause nobody had the nerve to cross out. On Sable's HUD, a final block appeared. Not cold. Almost, if mathematics can do such a trick fond. Test. Complete. Angles. Learned. Accepted. Corridor. Kithway. Permanent. Regulator. Arkady. S. Bound. Continuous. Witness. Rukhé. Bound. Recurring. Prohibitions. Malice vectors collapse. Footnote. Your species is untidy. Stay. Stay, Maya read, and for once had nothing sharp to add. Pike's laugh caught on a wire and came out like relief. Juno went briefly, obscenely professional, into sobbing once, then wiped their nose like they'd been doing this nature of reality thing all week and got back to graphs. Doctrine peeled away with dignity flaking from their paint. They would file appeals, speeches, manifestos. That was tomorrow's bruise. Today, 1,000 lives passed through a corridor that had learned to count a human heartbeat as a constant. Sable regarded stay. It wasn't a command. It was an admission. The Spindle, this cathedral that ate proofs and weathered empires, had not wanted another angle. It wanted a partner. It wanted a variable that did not reduce. It wanted an oath with teeth. She watched Wildfield clear the far mouth and raise its nose toward a horizon Sable would never walk under again. The coin tapped her hardshell one last time. Then the tapping stopped, not because the turbulence did, but because Kithway took the tap into itself. Sable could find it any time by closing her eyes. Inca's Road would have been a better name, Juno said softly. She'll carve her own road, Sable said. Let her tell me I chose wrong. Will you see her? Pike asked. Not cruel, just a man who liked walls where an answer could sit. Yes, Sable said, through this. She tapped her temple, not melodrama, just pointing at a door. When she steps onto Kithway the first time, I'll feel it and correct the wind. When she screams at me for missing recitals I never went to, I'll stiffen the sheath for her grip. That's how I'll see her. Rukhé looked at her as if taking measurements for a monument she didn't want to build. House will write this, she said, not as praise, as warning. Good, Sable said. Warnings are love letters, with good posture. The last of the first 6 barges slid through. Regulators stamped permanent with a speed that suggested they had always intended to be brave if you bullied them politely. Delcar filed witness with a footnote nobody expected. is greater than, we observed an oath placed as a load-bearing member, indecent and correct. Doctrine turned their loudspeakers down to a murmur and gathered their slogans like cloth against a storm. Their captain sent Sable a private packet with an attached line, "Your corridors will make us soft." Sable returned a single syllable, "Good." The Spindle stilled, not asleep, listening. Kithway pulsed through Sable's bones as if her marrow had learned sonar. It would be a problem later. It was the answer now. "Work," she said. "We stay until 12 through. Juno, publish Oath Mass as a standard. Nobody uses it without witness and a regulator who will sign with something that bleeds. Maya, dry the lenders with a hand towel and hang them on Prudence. Pike, find where Doctrine left a booby pin and turn it into sculpture." "What do you do?" Rukhé asked, leveled spear Akama. "Learn to walk with a corridor tied to my head," Sable said, "and write a rule the law people can say with their mouths full." Rukhé's spear grazed her gauntlet, the formal sign of house pledge or threat. With Rukhé, it was always both. "You will invite me each time you return for maintenance," she said. "If you forget, I will come anyway." "I won't forget," Sable said. "It's loud in here." They held. 6, 9, 12. The convoy poured through the throat of a cathedral that had agreed to bend its mass around an oath. Out at the mouth, the stars stacked like a promise you can see from the gutter and still reach for without lying. Under Sable's skin, Kithway's cadence became a drum you can work to. When fatigue finally made her hands scorn precision, Sable let Pike and Maya bulk out the mouth with pallets and light, so obvious even Malice would be embarrassed to trip. Juno switched to a bandwidth that sounded like a breeze and massaged the domains of a dozen petty gods into compliance. Rukhé tightened the witness stitches as if they were window bars in a clean city. The Spindle sent one last aside, plain as daylight. "Your species will tangle us. Expect visits." "Invite the 6th, Sable said, absurd for talking to a thing that had swallowed empires. "Tell them we stole their homework and drew in the margins." "The 6th left. You arrived. Continue." "Your rival spear work is pretty." Rukhé's eyebrow rose a degree, which in her culture probably meant the Spindle had proposed marriage. "It gossips," she said. "It earns it," Sable said. They undocked from Kithway's throat, on a time delay that let the corridor's new habits become old enough to be trusted. Doctrine receded, already writing a version of tonight where they weren't wrong so much as delayed. Delcar ships fanned to escort, not own. Regulators drafted text that carried courage under the cheap suit of prose. Sable turned once in the blue and faced the thing she'd just welded her life to. "Partner," she said, the word, a brand, and a truce. "We'll be back weekly. We'll argue. I'll swear. You'll pretend you're above that. We'll keep a road so kids can swear at us later." "Agreed." The Spindle wrote in a grammar that looked almost like a smile. "Bring your witness." "Always," Sable said, and Rukhé made a low sound that might have been approval translated from another species. They drifted out together. The mouth of Kithway framed a sprawl of lights, stations, barges, teeth. Beyond them, the convoy stacked on vectors like beads on a thread only Sable could feel with her whole body. Somewhere in a barge belly, Imka dreamed under cold glass, and if she turned her head in sleep, Sable felt the life sheath flex by a molecular hair to keep thirst from getting clever. Humanity did not win by being pretty. It did not win by breaking everything it touched and calling the rubble a throne. It won by shoving an oath into the universe and paying the bill in a currency only it minted. We will hurt ourselves to keep our promises. The Spindle, this alien cathedral that had learned angles from a vanished species, had no column for that variable until a woman who swore badly and meant well wrote it in with her bones. House Delcar would write it as warning. Vanguard Ark would write it as slur. Regulators would write it as policy and pretend it had always been there. Captain Huerta would write it into a log with a hand that shook at last. Juno would write it as a patch and then document it, swearing softly. Maya would write it across a lender's face with a smile that refused apology. Pike would write it on a hull in dents even Doctrine could read. Sable didn't write. She held. As the 13th barge cleared and the mouth of Kithway softened into the right kind of traffic, Rukhé finally spoke the thing house people say when they put down the knife and pick up the ledger. "Humanity," she said, taste-testing the word. "I will report they introduce a promise into physics and teach machines to respect it. They riot until reality admits it overreached. They are indecent. They are correct. They are—" She paused, because accuracy is a form of honor, dangerous for the world, not merely to it. Sable snorted, "Because solemnity makes poor scaffolding if you never hang laughter off it. Put that on the register," she said. Rukhé nodded once. "It is already there." The corridor thrummed through Sable's bones like a muscle choosing to be strong. 1,000 sleeps would end because this hurt had been chosen. Sable floated, unpretty and true, a piece of load-bearing human welded into a machine that had finally learned a new word. The Spindle watched. The universe's rules bent, and 33 barges went home.